Hi, my name is Tom Hills. I'm from Laudio, and this is a series that we're conducting with Kim Richards on adaptation. We're so glad that Kim is here. She's a nurse, speaker, and author, and a resiliency expert. She's founder of SelfCare Academy and has advised nurses and nurse leaders across the US. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So we're kicking off this 4-part series to help leaders with tools and advice on how to cope through this continual journey that's called the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we think about uncertainty, we at Laudio, of course, talk frequently with nurse leaders and senior chief nursing officers. And what they're telling us are several things right now. They've said, one, their nurses are exhausted from this first phase of the pandemic. Two, it's now obvious that we are running a marathon after running a sprint this last 6 months. And three, the future is still very uncertain. And it's hard for leaders to adapt, let alone be able to coach and help their leaders or their direct reports, their nurses, adapt to. So Kim, given this environment, what are your thoughts about this phase of uncertainty that we're in? What advice would you give leaders today in terms of how to better cope?
Wow, that's a big question. I think that healthcare systems have been forced to adapt to this new normal. And uncertainty is not something that nurses love. It creates a lot of, unpredictability, unreliability, variability, and that's not something that we as nurses really thrive in that kind of environment, just because, we're used to dealing with processes, we're used to dealing with evidence-based practice. And right now, there is no evidence-based practice to really support what we're going through now with COVID-19. So what this uncertain environment actually creates is a lot of mistrust and suspicion, which is a difficult environment for nurses to work in. I think that, this is really a time when personal and professional connections need to be strengthened. Communication needs to be crystal clear and much more intentional and much more consistent to perhaps, kind of create more of a stable environment. Because, like you said, it's been such a chaotic time for this first 6 months. This is not going to go away anytime soon. So how can we, as nurse leaders, create some kind of consistency, some kind of stability within our control when everything around us is, so uncertain? I think definitely words of affirmation make a big difference. People want to be appreciated, even though they're stressed out and working extremely hard in difficult situations. Just knowing that they're incredibly appreciated and that their manager, their leaders are very grateful for all the work that they're doing. And I think the other thing is, we're gowned up and masked up and, full-blown protective gear. I think the act of touching each other can make a big difference too, because we can't really read facial expressions. And, just maybe walking up to someone who you can tell is having a really tough day and just touching them on their back, just patting them or just kind of rubbing their shoulder a little bit is so appreciated by people who are on the front lines dealing with this every day. So those are just a few things. And I think the other thing is showing vulnerability. Especially young nurses may feel like, I'm not really sure what's going on here, how I got into this. You know, as nurse leaders, there's not one who hasn't experienced that same feeling early in their career. And I think storytelling and sharing vulnerability and times when they were wondering, you know, what the heck is going on and fearful and really maybe doubting their, you know, their path and doubting their, you know, their ability to be able to work through. I think sharing those kinds of stories with other people is incredibly powerful and shows a lot of courage. So I see a lot of courage through vulnerability and storytelling.
How can you equip, or what advice might you have for nurse leaders when they are frustrated by the chaotic times around them? Are there things that they can do? You know, you talked about touch, but beyond that, just in terms of preparing for a conversation, so that it is motivating, it is inspiring, it does help the people who are being led by that manager hold on to something. What kinds of things should that manager be thinking about before they start communicating?
Well, I think clear, consistent messages got to be there. You know, when you're hearing different things on different days, you're not really sure what to do with that. And that creates a lot of mistrust and suspicion. So being clear, being consistent, and maybe using some of the same words over and over and over can make a big difference for people. You know, making sure as nurse leaders that we have a filter on some of the messaging that we're using, and that we really check our own emotions before we start talking to somebody else who's highly emotional at that point. Nurse leaders need to, at this time, be, you know, the center of calm, even though, you know, it's kind of like the duck paddling like crazy and looking very calm and cool on the surface. We all have done that, and we all continue to do that at times because, you know, it's our job as nurse leaders to be able to manage our staff in the best way that we can, being honest, being consistent, being calm, and being extremely compassionate.
Right. Yeah, I think you had talked previously about vulnerability. You and I were just talking a few minutes ago about a conference that I just attended virtually where one of the nurse leaders, when asked what did she learn during this first phase of the pandemic, said that she learned that being vulnerable was the best way of showing courage and strength, or
Yeah.
being courageous and having strength.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, this has really been great, great words of advice, Kim. The next part of our series, we'll be talking more about how do we move through transition, because there will be something new that's awaiting us around the corner. How do we get ready for that? How do we hope for that? And what do we say as we move into that phase? So
Right.
we'll talk about that in our next series.
All right.